everyone, and welcome to the LinkedIn Live this month. I have the most amazing guest ever, Guy Kawasaki. Guy, thank you so much for being my guest today. And you know, one of the things that I was thinking about over and over again, we've been having some technical difficulties with StreamYard, is the quote from you that I tell myself all the time, which is, don't let the bozos grind you down. So that's exactly what I was thinking about. I was like, I'm not going to let this StreamYard issue grind me down. So, Guy, thank you so much for being my guest today. Welcome.
Listen, we don't want any StreamYard people to be slitting their wrists. It could be me, it could be Apple, it could be Shure. There's about 5, 6 platforms that falls here. So, you know, before we make StreamYard commit harakiri, let's make sure we're identifying the right culprit.
Who knows what it is, but Guy, we're so happy that you're here, and thank you to our guests for being patient as we were working through this. So I want to welcome all of you to our conversation today about being remarkable in celebration of September, which is Self-Improvement Month. And there is no one better than the amazing Guy Kawasaki. Guy, you, before I share the bio, you are one of these people that I kind of have on my right shoulder a lot of times. I mean, that quote, don't let the bozos grind you down. Believe it or not, that is a quote that I tell myself all the time when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling like people are getting me down. So you have been with me for a long, long time. So thank you for that. And thank you so much for being my guest. And thank you to all the people who are showing up. I see lots of people coming in the chat. So want to share a little bit about who Guy is. Guy is the chief evangelist of Canva, previously chief evangelist of Apple and trustee of the Wikipedia Foundation. He's creator of the Remarkable People podcast. And Guy, you've had some amazing people, amazing guests, including one of my all-time favorites, Jerry Lopez, the legendary surfer. And we're going to be talking about surfing in just a moment. He's the executive fellow of the Haas Business School of Business, adjunct professor at the University of New South Wales, and I think also at University of California at Santa Cruz. Is that correct, Guy?
Yes.
We also share the fact that we are both Stanford alums, and you are a prolific author. Wise Guy, ta-da, being one of them, along with The Art of the Start 2.0, The Art of Social Media, Enchantment, 11 other books. And then, of course, the one that we're going to be talking about today, Think Remarkable. So in our conversation today about being remarkable. So Guy, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, I wish that I did not have that technical difficulties. It's like embarrassing. I've been in computers longer than you've been alive. So
well, we're just so glad to have you here. So your latest book, which you wrote with Madison Neusmer, and I hope I'm correct. Neismer. Okay. Thank you for that correction. This is not a typical self-help narrative, as Jane Goodall explains in the foreword. It really challenges us to not only improve ourselves, but really to think about how each of us can help to make the world a better place. Certainly something that we are really needing today. So in our conversation today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into this idea of being remarkable and the path that we can each carve forward on that. So I want to start with surfing. I know that's something that you just recently adopted. Like you, I am a beginner surfer, but you have some amazing thoughts on life lessons from surfing that you've gained, not only from your own experiences, but also in interviewing some of the greatest surfers ever, including not only Jerry Lopez, but also surfers like Sean Thompson. So can you share a little bit about your experience as a surfer and also some of the life lessons that you've gained from it?
Sure. So I took up surfing at the age of 60, which is roughly 55 years too late. I took it up because my daughter took it up, and you know, it would be something that we could do together. And as a matter of fact, just a day ago, we came back from the Kelly Slater Surf Ranch. And have you ever been there, Laura? You have got to try that. It's like every wave is perfect. And compared to surfing in the ocean, where in the ocean you have to worry about the tide, the wind, the direction, the other surfers, worry about coral, worry about kelp, worry about all these things. Kelly played a surf ranch. You don't have to worry about anything like go. I can show you a video that is amazing. And Jerry Lopez, your best friend, was recently there. And I think I can explain almost everything about life with surfing analogies. Like, with surfing, about 95% of the time you're spending out there trying to make the right decision, pick the right way, take off in the right direction. And one lesson I learned, first of all, is if you never turn and paddle, you are never going to catch a wave. And is that not like life? If you wait for the perfect company, for the perfect spouse, for the perfect product, for the perfect service, you're never going to do anything. At some point, make your best shot, and then you focus on, instead of making the right decision, you focus on making your decision right. And in surfing, you turn and burn it. You got to make that decision right. So that's one thing. And I think a lot of it is, another thing, especially if you're an entrepreneur, there's so many people giving entrepreneurs advice about how to pitch, how to create, how to market, all these things. Another thing I learned from surfing is if you ask 5 good surfers how to surf and advice about surfing, you're going to get 8 different answers, and all these conflict. And so somebody's going to tell you, go to a longer board. And then 5 minutes later, someone's going to say, go to a shorter board. And then someone's going to say, go to a wider board, go to a narrower board. You need to have more rocker, less rocker. You need to have this and that, and your tail is wrong. And you can make yourself crazy listening to experts, just like in life.
So back to don't let the bozos get you down. You got to listen to your own voice. And I love this idea of, instead of focusing so much on the right decision, how do you make the decision right and kind of go with what you've got? But Guy, one of the things that I have learned from surfing, and again, I am a beginner surfer, to be clear, but it's just the lesson that I take away every time is the power of being brave. And this is something that I really see in you, and you on my right shoulder. I have really gotten that from you, even though this is my first time really meeting you. But this is something that you really embody. And in your book, Think Remarkable, you share a story about when you stood up to Steve Jobs. So can you share that story? And just, you described it as a man or mouse moment. So do you mind sharing that story, and then a little bit about how this has been your part of being remarkable? Go ahead.
If we could just back up 30 seconds, I do not consider myself brave. I mean, if you want to hear a story about bravery, I'll tell you, I interviewed someone in my book or in my podcast that about 10 years ago, she was diagnosed with ALS. And ALS typically means you're dead in 2 years. And she has survived 10 years. And when she was diagnosed with ALS, she decided that she was going to complete a marathon in 50 states, and she did it. Now, that's brave. And, there are people who, I interviewed Garrett McNamara, and he surfs 100-foot wave. That's brave. I'm not brave. I think I have a growth mindset where I take up surfing at 60 and hockey at 44, but do not, this is kind of a Dan Quayle moment in reverse. I am no JFK. I am not brave. So with that caveat, I think it's all about the growth mindset, that you believe that you can learn new things and do new things, and you don't listen to the naysayers. And I think one of the most potent naysayers is the naysayer in your head. You've got to learn to turn that boy off.
Yeah, you in your book, you actually
wait. You asked for the Steve Jobs story. I forgot.
Oh yeah, go ahead and tell the story.
I don't want to be accused of not answering your questions. So this was my second tour of duty at Apple, and I was in a meeting. Steve Jobs had not yet come back. He had sold the company to Apple next, but he had not yet fully come back. And so we're in this meeting, and the people from Chiat were showing us the the Think Different campaign. And this is something in 1997. And if you're not old enough to know, in 1997, there was an ad campaign featuring people like Pablo Picasso, Amelia Earhart, Nelson Mandela. And the pitch was that back then, if you were using a Macintosh, you really were thinking different because everybody else was using Windows and MS-DOS. So if you wanted to be like Nelson Mandela, Albert Einstein, Amelia Earhart, Richard Branson, you had to think different. So anyway, the ad agency shows us these commercials, and we all loved it. And at the end, he says, I have 2 copies of the commercials. I'm going to give one to you, Steve, and one to Guy. And Steve says, don't give one to Guy. And I spoke up. I said, what's the matter, Steve? Don't you trust me? And he said, no, I don't trust you, Guy. So this was the moment. I wouldn't say it's a moment of bravery. I would say it's a moment of, sometimes you don't want to look back and say, why was I such a wimp? Why did I wimp out? So when he said, Guy, yeah, I don't trust you, I said, that's okay, Steve, because I don't trust you either, Steve. So that cost me about $250 million. And I could have my own Kelly Slater wave farm if I didn't open my big mouth, but it was worth it.
I call that being brave. You call it having a growth mindset, but either way, it's really inspiring to so many of us. And, Guy, I just want to share really quickly about that Think Different campaign. One of the other people who was in that was actually Martha Graham, and modern dance pioneer. And one of the things that she once said, which I found so inspiring, I had actually at the time that campaign came out, I was a professional dancer in New York City, and I have a vivid memory of coming in from New York City into the Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia train station, and those the ad campaign was plastered all over the train station. And in particular, the Martha Graham one really stood out for me, obviously, as a dancer. And one of the things that she said, which I love, is she said, if I could say it, I wouldn't have to dance it. So just this idea of not only were you being brave in the moment, but you were being yourself. And I think so much of being remarkable is about being yourself. So let's talk a little bit about adopting the growth mindset. So you characterize this as a growth mindset moment, and you actually quote your son in the opening chapter. Why is this happening to me? Replace that with, what is this trying to teach me?
My son said that when he was 18 years old. So I wish I could claim credit for that, like because of my upbringing or even my DNA, but probably more my wife, and he's adopted, so it's not my DNA for sure. So it just shows you behind every successful man is an amazing woman. That's another lesson you should pick up.
Well, tell us a little bit about how, you and Madison kind of described in this chapter about a step toward thinking remarkable, becoming remarkable, is to really adopt a growth mindset.
Yeah. So this is the work of Carol Dweck of Stanford University, and she wrote a book called Mindset. And in that book, she basically says there are 2 fundamental kinds of mindsets. One is a growth mindset, where you believe you can grow, you can learn new things, you can do new things. And the fixed mindset. And the fixed mindset believes that you cannot learn new things, you cannot grow. It also means that, if God forbid that you are successful at something, it means that you do not need to grow anymore. You don't need to learn anymore, which arguably is even a worse form of the fixed mindset than not trying anything at all. But anyway, so we've interviewed about 250 people for Remarkable People, and every one of them had a growth mindset. Whether you're Jane Goodall, who starts with loving little animals and now is the Jane Goodall we all know, or Neil deGrasse Tyson having an interest in planets and stars, and now he's an astrophysicist, or Julia Child. She was working for the OSS. So Julia Child started as a spook, believe it or not, and turned into the French chef. So all these people, they had a growth mindset. They didn't just accept where they were as something that's not changeable and not improvable.
When Carol Dweck came out with that, I found that to be so refreshing. This idea that my destiny is not predefined, that I can always start now, and that it's less important about what I do and more about the effort that I put in. I think that's something that's so important. I think then another piece, especially when you're talking about someone like Jane Goodall, and you talk about this in Think Remarkable, is that kind of ironically, in being remarkable, you need to start with an outward focus. So it's not just about repositioning yourself and thinking about what your brand is. It's more about what am I going to do to make the world a better place? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So in these interviews with 250 remarkable people, not one ever expressed a sentiment that one day I woke up and I decided I was going to reposition myself as being remarkable. So I hired an executive coach and I hired a PR firm and I started making speeches at TED and I wrote white papers and I repositioned myself as remarkable. I can guarantee you that people like Jane Goodall and Steve Jobs and Angela Duckworth, Carol Dweck, they don't spend any time thinking, well, how do I convince people I'm remarkable? What they do is they do remarkable things. They make a computer, they write a book, they win a MacArthur Fellowship, not for repositioning themselves, but for their actual accomplishments. So if you want the world to think you are remarkable, do remarkable things, and then they have no choice but to expect that and to consider you that way. So this is not about putting lipstick on a pig. This is about fundamentally changing the animal.
And I think also, channeling Michelle Obama, to do remarkable things, you got to do something. And you got to think outside of yourself, like, what is the something that I'm going to do to make the world a better place?
And you know what? I mean, I want to be careful here that I'm not trying to tell you that to be remarkable, you have to be a Jane Goodall or a Steve Jobs and sell millions of devices or anything like that. You can be remarkable changing one life. It could even be your life. You could be remarkable teaching a 6th grade class or a Sunday school or coaching a Pop Warner football team. But don't believe that the only remarkable people are the people who are famous, because the bulk of remarkable people are not famous. And it's really interesting. It's almost a contradiction that if you want to be remarkable, stop thinking about being remarkable and just do remarkable things. And being considered remarkable is a natural outgrowth of doing remarkable things. So the key is do remarkable things, not try to reposition yourself. And that's why Jane Goodall wrote that this is not a self-help book in the tradition of, go to this weekend seminar at the Ritz-Carlton, pay $5,000, and you're going to stand in an audience, and this guru is going to stand up and tell you that you're remarkable, believe in yourself, and now pay me $5,000. I mean, that's not the spirit of this book at all. There will never be a Guy Kawasaki seminar on how to be remarkable at the Ritz-Carlton for $5,000. Never, ever.
Guy, one of the things I really loved about the book is really it's a collection of stories. It's telling stories of individuals who, just as you talked about, they weren't thinking about being remarkable. And maybe we should have retitled this Do Remarkable. They were doing remarkable things. And that's really what that's about. And I think, one of the key pieces in, digging into Angela Duckworth here. And actually, one of the things that I love about Angela Duckworth, she was a teacher. I was an urban public high school teacher as well. And one of the things that she noticed is that the kids who really set themselves apart were the ones who were able to really persevere. So this idea of grit, can you talk a little bit about how grit is the next step?
I would make the case that the flip side of growth is grit. Because
Mm.
if you decide you have a growth mindset and you embody the growth mindset of trying new things, most likely when you try something new, you're going to fail, or it's certainly not going to be like instant success. So if you embrace the growth mindset, it means you have to also embrace grit, which means that you persevere when things are not going well. And I started surfing at 60, and you can probably relate to this, that the it takes 2 or 3 years to surf in even a semi intermediate stage, right? I mean, it's not going to happen after 2 times of surfing. Now, God bless you. You may be just naturally gifted, and for you, after 2 times, you are a great surfer. But it's 10 years for me to be where I am. And I suffered many setbacks, many embarrassing moments. I have fallen every way possible. Um, and you just have to keep pushing. I think that, there's this old theory that 90% of success is just showing up. And I really do believe that you just keep showing up, because most people are not willing to pay the price.
Well, first of all, I love this idea, and JD also wrote this in the chat here, that the flip side of growth is grit, and that's something that I'm really going to take away from this. And certainly in surfing, you have to just keep showing up again and again and again, just like you have to keep doing in life. And it's going to be imperfect and it'll be messy, but we keep doing it anyway. And I think that this also really leads us to the third key element, which is grace. Can you tell us a little bit about grace?
Well, grace, this is the third element of my book, because I noticed that with these remarkable people that I were talking to, at the end of their career, they have made a very conscious decision to pay back society, to help young people, to help other people also achieve success. And this happened time and time again, that remarkable people like to help other people be remarkable too. They don't view the world as a zero-sum game, so that, oh my God, if you be remarkable, it takes away from my remarkableness. It's not a zero-sum game. It's like, the rising tide floats all boats. And I think that grace means you take the high road, that you help other people, you give people the benefit of the doubt, and it's not about you anymore. And I can take a very good example of somebody who I would say could have been one of the most remarkable people ever for all his inventions, but he just has a zero amount of grace and graciousness, which is Elon Musk. Elon Musk could have been one of the most remarkable people, and he still has a chance to do that, but there is no grace or graciousness about that man. And, obviously,
So the
I don't drive a Tesla, and I
opposite.
never will. I will walk before I drive a Tesla.
I love Sarah. Sarah Green has written in here about grace is elevating others, and that's ultimately what this is really about. And again, it really ties us back to what you were sharing about, instead of focusing so much on being remarkable, how might you do remarkable things? And Carol Hink is also writing, a rising tide lifts all boats. So maybe that's a takeaway for all of us. You dedicated your book to Gen Z, and in fact, you even brought in Gen Zer Madison to write your book, Think Remarkable. And you've shared stories about inspiring young people like Olivia Juliana. Can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to dedicate this book to Gen Zers?
Well, I decided to dedicate this book to Gen Z because I think that boomers like me, we have screwed up so long that we're not going to fix it. I'm throwing down the gauntlet to Gen Z. I'm saying to Gen Z, if you think that your parents or grandparents are going to fix this world, and then you're just going to inherit this perfect world, I hate to burst your bubble, but that ain't going to happen. So, it's up for you to do these things and to vote and to take an active role, because you cannot depend on others. So this book is written really with Gen Z in mind. There's 88 tactics in how to be remarkable. And the book is 170 pages, so it's 2 pages per tactic on average. And I have to read about 52 books a year because of my podcast. And I have to tell you that after a while, you get tired of these books that take 200 pages to explain one concept. So I take 200 pages to explain 88 concepts. And I think that is the Gen Z mentality, that short articles, lots of bullet points, all highlighted. And it's like boom, 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 boom. I'm not trying to like build this entire 200-page book about one thing, building this case. I'm just telling you, this is what it is. This is how to do it. You either believe me or you don't.
And I want to wrap us up with Jane Goodall in the foreword of your book. She described that nature is what gives her hope, and the resiliency of nature. If we give it space, that it can recover. What is it, Guy, that gives you hope?
Wow. Nobody has ever asked me that. What is it that gives me hope? I think it is looking at other people and how much they have accomplished, and usually accomplish by overcoming a lot. So I'm not referring to the case of a third generation billionaire who went to Ivy League schools and now works at Goldman Sachs or McKinsey. I'm not looking at that case. What inspires me are people like, you get diagnosed with ALS and you complete a marathon in 50 states. You're sentenced to 44 years of imprisonment for accessory to murder. You get out after 22 years, and now you become a successful artist. That's Halim Flowers. I'm inspired by people who lived in the projects of New York. Both parents were crack addicts, stealing money from their kids. And now that person is a successful respiratory therapist. And I look at people like that, look at what they've overcome. They are truly brave. They've overcome homelessness. They've overcome homelessness. They've overcome crime. They've overcome addiction. They've overcome poverty. That's what inspires me, not people who have had it, handed to them on a silver platter.
So those of us who are able to overcome the odds are that's what gives you inspiration. And perhaps it's the seed within all of us that we can all overcome the circumstance we're in. So I want to thank Guy. Thank you so much for being my guest today to talk about this idea of being remarkable, and that being remarkable actually starts with doing remarkable things, and how all of us can in fact do remarkable things by really digging into growth mindset, remembering that the flip side of growth mindset is grit, and then of course to retain a sense of grace. And that I love this idea that it's these stories of people who have overcome great odds that is what gives you inspiration more than anything else. So thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. Guy, thank you again for being my guest today. Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Have a